And how do people go about even looking into real estate? Like if they want to buy a house, they have no idea. Let's say I have bad credit and things like that. Are there programs or what can I do? You know what I mean? I want to buy a house, but I don't know what I need to do first.
I think the first thing as a buyer, the first thing that you want to do is first you need to sit down and really understand your financial situation. Most people, if they don't own a home, they're more than likely renting, or they're in maybe they're sharing an apartment, they're doing something. You need to sit down as a buyer and sit down and really understand what is my budget? How much am I spending per month? And when you look at it on the periphery, you're probably in a situation where you can purchase a home. And it goes into, depending on how your credit situation is. And that's what I love about this area in Atlanta. There's homes in all price ranges, in every area pretty much of the metro, from Douglasville all the way over to Covington, all the way up north and down south. There's stuff for the person who makes $30,000 a year, and there's some for that person that makes $300,000 a year. But I think it comes down to the individual being prepared to make an investment. And so if you say, well, I got bad credit, I don't have any money, and I'm about to get evicted, how can I buy a house? Well, I don't know. Unicorns do exist. I think I rolled. I was trying to ride with it on the way back up here. But that's where I think is the first place. And I think the second step, and I always tell people when I talk to them, go to whoever you're banking with and talk with them. Talk with the loan officer there. You might get your feelings hurt. I mean, you might get your feelings hurt. But you might not. You might realize that, hey, I qualify for $125,000.
I can actually do this.
I can actually do this. But I think a lot of people want to go from, as you say, they start looking up houses on Zillow. They start looking at these $300,000, these expensive houses are $250,000, $200,000 house, and I'm like, hey, my payment $1,200. I only paid $900 in rent. But they don't. Sometimes when they look at these mortgage calculators, it's not taking into account. Okay, it's $1,200. That's based off of the tax of $2,000. Well, if this house is in the city of Atlanta, your taxes are going to be $4,000. That changes that payment. So I think really understanding your own financial situation, taking a look at your credit, and really looking at your savings and understanding what kind of loans can we get. And well, I'll let you answer the next question, but
we'll get into that.
Okay.
Let me pass to Mr. Kola, so then I'll come back and ask you.
Just off of the last thing you spoke about, how high on the scale from 0 to 10 would you rank the importance of real estate and why?
Every investment has risk. And I feel like real estate is an investment that the average man can make, that can reap a lot of rewards. And Brandon, when he was doing his brown paper bag, he mentioned there have been real estate bubbles. Not just the one that happened in 06, 7, and 8. I mean, that was big. But people forget 89, 90, 91. The same thing. It wasn't as dramatic, but house prices went down. Historically, house prices are going to continue to rise. They usually rise. I think the average, don't quote me, I want to say it's like 4 or 5%. It's a solid investment. But anything can happen because it is, like I said, it's an investment, so there is risk. But I feel like for the average man, that's the best investment that they can make. That's affordable, that they can control and be able to see those returns in that 4 or 5 year range instead of playing the stock market or buying precious metals or just different things. I think that's the best. And like I said, it's an investment, so there is risk involved with everything.
So what would you rank it on?
Oh yes, I'm sorry. Yes, those questions. I would say I would put it up there about a 9.
You give it a 9.
I would say on a 9 of the investment scale, because even if you purchase a property, that's your primary residence and you live there. Worst case, if it only rises 3% a year, 10 years down the road when you sell it, there'll be equity there. So that's a positive thing. I mean, there's no way you can spend it. You can put the same money into the S&P 500, which has a higher return traditionally over the same amount of time, but there's more fluctuation within that stock market. So you might not be able to get that money out at that time. So from a risk standpoint, I think that it's the best, like I said, it's the best investment on a 9, on the 1 to 10 scale. So for the average man, definitely.
So one thing I was thinking about too, in this whole concept of real estate, since that was the word, and you have some experience with it, how can you speak to this idea regarding schools and real estate and that combination? And the reason why I say that is because as I've looked for property, or people that I know have looked for properties,
there's a backstory with all this.
One of the first things that people ask is, how's the school system? And as you go up there and look, when you find some of these great school systems, the house is like $400,000 or $500,000, right?
Yes,
so then, to Kola's point, it's like, well, should I buy a house? Or should I even try to? Should I buy a house that I can qualify for? Going back to your piece with $125,000. Or should I say, you know what, investing is important, owning real estate is important, but school system is even more important to me. I will just go and rent a house in that area for the school system because my child will be able to benefit more. So how do you equate those two? Like, what do you do in those types of situations? Because I'm sure people ask you that as buyers.
It's a balance. It's a balance. You're asking, what is the best decision for me based on renting, buying, location, what I can afford?
Right.
And it comes down to, when I go back, what is not just your financial situation, what is your family situation?
Mm-hmm.
Children. You don't have any children, right? So, so you wanted to go in quote unquote the best school district, or say someone tells you, hey, go over to East Cobb, that's a great school district. But as a single man, is that going to really meet your needs?
Gotcha.
Right. Different situation.
Right.
So when you talk about, well, should I rent or should I buy? That starts coming into, well, how is that going to affect my children?
Mm-hmm.
Is that going to help? Is that going to help me? Can I? And that's the thing, especially as an agent or a broker, when people talk about this area or that area, or good schools or bad schools, I hate that term, good schools or bad schools, because
I love it.
Trying to be Mr. Brown, people bad. So let's go ahead and open this thing up. I really don't like that, because what you get out of your school has a lot to do with what you put into as a parent.
Oh, yeah.
As a community and as individuals. So, just to your question, how do I decide? There is no magic bullet. It all comes down to our individual situation, because all three of us have different situations.
Right.
But we have to understand. But if you don't understand your financial situation in it, you're going in blind.
Right.
And that's the thing about it, especially as real estate, especially with real estate, you got to remember that when you're dealing with agents or brokers, this is sales.
Right.
I hate to say it, but it's the truth. So sometimes you might deal with someone who doesn't have their best interest, and it just says, hey, man, Cola's qualified for 200.
Right. Let me push him there.
You need to go get a house. And
Right.
he's going to push him that. So you have to make sure who you're working with, that is someone that you can trust, someone that you value, that values not just the transaction that they're going to get some money off of.
And that's why you should call Kevin Walker. Call Kevin.
That's why you call Kevin Walker, man.
But and going to this idea, I love the fact that you brought up the idea of good schools, bad schools, because you have good students. When I say good, academically sound and things like that, in all areas. But when you think about locations, you think about this idea of, usually it's a segregated sense to where that's in a bad area because it's this. But I was going to ask you this, speaking of the context and the landscape of Atlanta, the steering people a certain way, does it still happen? Because I'm thinking about Buford Highway, pretty much. You have all these Hispanic areas, right? And I think about Decatur, all black. I think about Alpharetta, or some of these areas mostly white. Does it still occur? Or is that people driven or real estate driven? I don't know.
I don't have the full answer, but I feel like segregation happens. We segregate ourselves, and as unfortunate as it is, it just happens. Mm. So when I look at even my own county, Douglas County is a changing county. But in Douglas County, I believe this is one of the first elections where you had I believe all the leadership elected was African American. Mm. I hear rumblings all the time now for people that live around me and just in our community, how we need to move up north, or we need to go further west. And so when you say do segregate, I feel like it's happening naturally. And even initially when you went, your very first from your brown paper bag, and you talked about in '68, the Fair Housing Act that was passed. It actually happened right after Dr. King died. Mm-hmm. And it was because the federal government found that you were having almost so many instances of discrimination when it came to housing amongst minorities. So they passed the Fair Housing Act to actually enforce that you can't discriminate in most housing transactions for race, for gender, for national origins. Right. And then in 88, or 87 or 88, they actually passed the second part of it, where it went into adding in that children with families or people with disabilities. But I think that it is a prevalent thing. Steering is literally, which our current president was sued for, steering people away from areas based on demographics. And there's another thing called block busting. Block busting is another. A lot of people by the Department of Justice were sued for that, where they go in saying, well, you know, this minority is coming into your neighborhood. You might want to sell before they come.
Oh, wow.
And so it's real. It's hard to say that things like segregation and
racism or
not racism, discrimination that doesn't happen, but it does. And it's just the world we live in.
Well, I would love to continue this conversation. Sir Kola would. It's been very informative, and we truly appreciate your words and insight, particularly in regard to real estate and just all the things that you do. Hopefully, it could be a source of inspiration for someone else. We're going to let Kola top off the last part of our segment.
So what we normally like to do is we'll have a book of the week or a phrase or a word that you may recommend to the viewers to check out. So do you have a book that you recommend that you throw out there for them?
Book of the week.
It can be
I was gonna say gifted hands, but I'm joking. I think book of the week. One book that I read recently was Tony Dungy's autobiography.
Oh,
and that was. I really feel like that was excellent. It escapes me off the top of my head what the actual term, the name of it. But it goes through his whole life. He started as coach for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I believe he played for the Steelers. Then he was a coach for the Steelers, going into as well, even before that, as an assistant, and then actually getting the job with the Colts. And I just felt like his life is just a phenomenal read.
Can I ask you what made you check that book out, or the autobiography?
I believe it was given to me as a gift, but I heard about it. He's a Christian man, and just knowing about him from NFL football. Yeah. So it just piqued my interest to check it out.
That's cool.
Definitely a good read.
Well, again, thank you so much, Kevin, for stopping by the Brown Paper Bag.
Great pleasure.
Yes, it's been a pleasure. Hopefully you've enjoyed, and we'll catch you next week.
See you next week.
Brown Paper Bag.